I want you to think about your morning routine. Wake up, maybe hit snooze twice, stumble to the kitchen, make a coffee, check your phone, have a shower, eat something, complain about how tired you are. Now, throw all of that away, completely, every single part of it. No bed, no alarm, no coffee, and I genuinely mean this when I say that alone would end most of us. No shower, no breakfast waiting in a cupboard, no phone, no heating, no roof that you own or rent or have any legal claim to whatsoever. Instead, you wake up on the ground. It is cold. Something rustled in the dark about an hour ago and nobody has slept properly since. Your back is in absolute pieces and the sun has barely come up, which means the day has already started because in the ancient world, the sun does not wait for you. This is a day in the life of an ancient human, roughly 50,000 years ago, Upper Paleolithic period, somewhere in what is now Europe. Let us walk through it. Hour by hour, roughly about 5 a.m. You do not wake up gently. There is no gradual easing into consciousness, no lying there half awake thinking about your plans for the day. You go from asleep to alert in about 2 seconds flat because that is what your nervous system has been trained to do over a lifetime of sleeping in places where things can kill you. The fire is low. This is the first crisis of the day, not a metaphorical crisis, an actual, urgent, practical crisis. Because a low fire at dawn means it nearly went out during the night, which means the person on fire watch, and yes, someone was on fire watch, all night, every night, had a bad few hours. Someone feeds it, dry bark, carefully stored, small pieces first, then larger ones as the flame takes. Everyone watches, nobody says anything. The fire coming back to life is, without exaggeration, the best thing that has happened so far today. Now, the group takes stock. How many people? Everyone accounted for? Anyone ill, injured, showing signs of fever? These are not casual morning check-ins. They are survival assessments. A group in the Paleolithic is only as strong as its weakest member, and a sick or injured person changes everything. The hunting plan, the travel schedule, the food allocation. Food is the next immediate concern. Whatever was stored from yesterday, and there may not be much, gets assessed. Is there enough for today? Enough to share between everyone, including children, the elderly, the injured? If the answer is yes, good. If the answer is no, hunting and foraging just became urgent rather than routine. The group eats what there is, cold, leftover meat from a previous kill, perhaps, nuts, dried berries if it is the right season, roots. The concept of a hot breakfast exists only if someone is motivated enough to cook over the newly revived fire, and this morning, with everything else going on, that is not the priority. It is barely light. You have been awake for 20 minutes. You are already problem solving at a level that most modern humans will not reach until their third meeting of the day. Here is something that might surprise you. Ancient humans did not just wander around randomly hoping to bump into food, they planned. The senior members of the group, the most experienced hunters, the most knowledgeable foragers, would have held what we might loosely call a morning briefing. Not around a conference table, obviously, around a fire, but the function was the same. Where were the animals yesterday? Which direction were the reindeer heading? Was the river still fordable at the northern crossing? Did anyone hear wolves in the eastern valley overnight, which might mean a carcass they could scavenge? Is the weather going to hold, or does that cloud formation mean rain by midday? These people read their environment the way we read a screen. Every detail was information: the direction of the wind, the behavior of birds, the condition of the vegetation, the state of the ground. Skills built over years of observation, passed down through generations of accumulated knowledge, and then, based on all of that, they divided up. The hunters, typically but not exclusively the strongest adults, headed out in a coordinated group. They were not going for a casual walk. They were going to work. Hard, skilled, dangerous work that required tracking, patience, stamina, and courage in quantities that would make most modern people's eyes water. The foragers, a mixed group of adults and older children, headed in a different direction, following known routes to reliable food sources: nut-bearing trees, berry patches, root beds, fishing spots. These routes were not guesswork, they were memorized, updated, and refined over years of careful observation. Back at camp, someone stayed. The very young, the very old, the injured, and whoever was assigned to guard them, maintain the fire, process any food from yesterday, prepare tools, and keep watch. Because leaving a camp entirely unattended, with your food stores, your tools, your children, was not a risk any sensible group took. It is not yet 7 in the morning. The team has already been briefed, divided, and deployed. Let us talk about the hunt, because the image most people have, brave warrior spots animal, hurls spear, animal dies, everyone eats, is almost entirely wrong. Real Paleolithic hunting was slow, methodical, exhausting, and frequently unsuccessful. The first stage was tracking. Finding an animal worth pursuing meant reading the ground, footprints, disturbed vegetation, droppings, marks on tree bark, and following a trail that might be hours old. Trackers could determine from a set of footprints not just what animal made them, but how large it was, how fast it was moving, whether it was carrying an injury, and roughly how long ago it passed through. This is a cognitive skill of extraordinary complexity. Modern researchers who have studied expert trackers in contemporary hunter-gatherer societies describe it as a form of applied science, systematic, evidence-based, hypothesis-driven. These people were not guessing. They were reading. Once the animal was located, the real patience began. You do not charge at a reindeer with a spear from 50 meters and hope for the best. You close the distance, slowly, downwind, using every piece of terrain available as cover, moving when the animal's head is down, freezing when it looks up. This process could take hours. And then, when the moment was right, the coordinated strike. Multiple hunters from multiple angles, cutting off escape routes, driving the animal toward the most advantageous ground. A spear throw that needed to be accurate enough to hit a vital area, hard enough to penetrate thick hide, and timed precisely with the movements of a panicking animal that very much did not want to be there. If it worked, brilliant. If it did not, and often it did not, the whole process started again. There are estimates that successful large kills happened perhaps 2 or 3 times per week for an active hunting group, interspersed with many, many unsuccessful attempts. And when a large kill did happen, the work was only beginning. A reindeer or horse carcass needs to be processed on site before it can be moved. That means butchering, removing the meat, organs, and fat from the bones using stone tools, quickly and efficiently before scavengers arrive, because they will arrive. The smell of blood travels enormous distances, and every carnivore in range knows what it means. Working fast, the hunters could strip a large animal in under an hour. Everything usable came with them: meat, fat, organs, the liver eaten first, raw, because it is packed with nutrients and does not travel well, bones for marrow, hide for clothing and shelter, sinew for binding, even the stomach, which could be used as a water container. Nothing was wasted. In a world without supermarkets, waste was not inefficiency. Waste was starvation. While the hunters were out doing the dramatic spear-throwing, obviously video game-ready stuff, the foragers were doing something less glamorous and arguably more important, keeping everyone alive the rest of the time. Here is a fact that consistently surprises people. In most hunter-gatherer societies, the majority of daily calories come not from hunting, but from foraging. Plants, nuts, roots, berries, insects, grubs, eggs, shellfish, small animals, the unglamorous, reliable, daily business of finding food that does not fight back. The foragers knew their territory in extraordinary detail, which plants were edible and which were toxic, and some poisonous plants look almost identical to edible ones, so this knowledge was not trivial. It was life and death, which roots were worth digging in which season, where the hazelnut trees were most productive, which stream bends held the most fish. Children learned by walking alongside adults from the moment they could keep pace. By 10 or 11 years old, a child in a Paleolithic band would have a working knowledge of their local environment that would take a modern botanist years to acquire through academic study. The foragers also gathered non-food materials, specific stones for tool making, particular plants with medicinal properties, willow bark, which contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin, was used by ancient humans for pain relief, birch bark tar for adhesive, ochre for pigment. The foraging party was not just a food gathering operation, it was a supply run for the entire group's material needs. They walked. A lot. Modern studies of contemporary hunter-gatherer groups suggest foragers cover between 8 and 15 kilometers per day on a typical foraging trip, over broken terrain, carrying everything they collect on the return journey. By the time the foragers got back to camp, mid to late afternoon, typically, they had walked the equivalent of a half marathon, collected, identified, and processed dozens of different materials, and kept a constant watch for predators the entire time. Still think the hunters had the harder job? Back at camp, the day was not quiet. Tool maintenance was continuous work. Stone tools, hand axes, scrapers, knives, spear points, dulled and chipped with use and needed constant attention. Knapping flint is a skill that takes years to master, and the person in the group who was best at it was enormously valuable. A sharp, well-made scraper made the difference between processing a hide efficiently and spending 3 times as long on the same job. Bone needles needed sharpening, spear shafts needed checking for cracks or warping, bindings of sinew or plant fiber needed replacing if they were weakening. Every tool in the group's possession was maintained, repaired and cared for because replacing them was expensive in time and material. Children were not in school, but they were absolutely learning. In a Paleolithic band, children learned by watching, helping, and gradually taking on increasing responsibility. A 5-year-old might be gathering firewood and fetching water. A 10-year-old might be helping process hides or learning to knap basic tools. A 15-year-old might already be joining foraging parties or participating in easier hunts. There was no concept of childhood as a protected, leisurely phase of life. Children were small contributors to the group's survival from the moment they were physically capable of contributing. Not cruelly. There is plenty of evidence of play, creativity, and affection in ancient human communities, but practically. Hide processing happened at camp too. Freshly obtained skins needed to be scraped, stretched, and worked while still pliable before they dried and stiffened. This is hard physical labor, scraping with a stone tool, working the hide repeatedly with hands and sometimes teeth to soften it, hours of it, for a single skin. The camp was not a place of rest during the day, it was a workshop. By late afternoon, the various groups began filtering back to camp. The hunters returned, either with a successful kill already partially processed or without, which changed the mood considerably. A successful hunt meant work, butchering, distributing, cooking, but it also meant a good evening. A failed hunt meant reassessment, tighter rationing, a different plan for tomorrow. The foragers returned with whatever they had collected. Everything was pooled. This is a crucial point. In Paleolithic bands, food was almost certainly shared communally. Not because ancient humans were idealists, but because it was the only rational strategy. A good hunt fed everyone. A bad hunt meant everyone shared the shortfall. Hoarding was both socially unacceptable and strategically pointless in a small mobile group where everyone's survival depended on everyone else. Now, cooking began in earnest. Meat roasted over fire, root vegetables buried in embers, bones cracked and the marrow extracted, rich, fatty, calorie-dense and deeply valued. Nuts and seeds ground between stones into a rough paste. Water heated in a bark or hide container using fire-heated stones dropped into the liquid because you cannot put an animal hide directly over fire, but you absolutely can boil water in one if you are clever about it. The evening meal was the main meal of the day, and around that fire, with food in hand, something shifted. The urgency of the day eased slightly. The immediate pressures, find food, avoid predators, maintain fire, care for the vulnerable, were not gone, but they were managed. And in that space, something unmistakably human happened. People talked. Do not underestimate the evenings. Around the fire, after eating, ancient humans did something that separated them from every other species on the planet. They told stories. Not just entertainment, not just gossip, though there was absolutely gossip. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer communities find that a significant chunk of evening conversation is social information. Who did what? Who is reliable? Who made a mistake today? Who was brave? Social knowledge that kept the group's internal relationships calibrated and functional. But beyond that, stories. Narratives that carried information about the landscape, about animals, about past events, and how they were handled. A story about a hunting encounter last winter, told and retold around the fire, was also a training manual, an instruction set, a way of transmitting hard-won knowledge to people who were not there. This is thought to be one of the key cognitive advantages that modern humans had over Neanderthals, the ability to communicate complex, abstract, hypothetical information. Not just mammoth there, but last time we saw mammoths near the eastern ridge in early winter, they were moving toward the frozen river, and here is what happened when we followed them. Music was part of this too. Bone flutes found in Germany and Slovenia, dating back 40,000 years, were real instruments. People sang. Percussion, clapping, drumming on logs and hides created rhythm. In the firelight, with food in bellies and the group intact after another day, music was not a luxury. It was community maintenance. It was belonging. And somewhere in those evenings, someone made art. The people who painted Chauvet Cave 40,000 years ago with a skill that astonishes modern artists were not specialists living apart from the community. They were members of a band, just like everyone else. They hunted and foraged and processed hides and maintained tools. And then, sometimes, by firelight, they created something extraordinary. Why? We can theorize. Ritual, communication, record keeping, pure creative expression, probably all of these at once, but the fact that it happened, that people who spent their days fighting to survive still found the impulse and the energy and the will to create beauty, is one of the most moving things in all of human history. As the fire burned lower and the group settled to sleep, the final logistics of the day fell into place. Sleeping arrangements were not random. Children and vulnerable members slept in the center, closest to the fire and most protected. Stronger adults arranged themselves around the outside. Someone, or more likely, multiple people in rotation, stayed on watch through the night. Sleep in the ancient world was not the long, unbroken 8-hour block that modern sleep science tells us we need. Emerging research suggests that before artificial lighting, human sleep patterns were segmented. A first sleep of a few hours, then a period of wakefulness of an hour or two, then a second sleep until dawn. This middle waking period was likely social, quiet conversation, tending the fire, reflection. It was also a security measure. Multiple people waking naturally through the night meant the camp was never entirely unattended. The fire was never entirely unwatched. And slowly, over the course of the night, with one ear always tuned to the sounds outside, the group rested, storing energy for tomorrow, which would bring exactly the same challenges, the same demands, the same requirement to be fully functional, fully present, and fully capable from the moment the sun came up. No sick days, no rest days, no option to just not deal with it today. Just another day, 50,000 years ago,